Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ, the YouTube, Twitch, and Discord channel. Thank you very much for joining me. This is a long-form content show, an hour of unscripted, open, live discussions as we talk about something all week long. And just to make things a little bit easier to navigate, we subdivide those same topics all week long. And today is a little bit of a change. Today, on Tuesdays, have been a little bit of a grab bag over time. I have slightly retitled it TVs and Movies to RPGs, and you'll understand why in a minute. For those who don't know, I often bring up multimedia as examples of doing things for right or wrong and stuff. Thanks, Cam. I appreciate it. Again, for those who don't know, this show does go live on Twitch, YouTube, and the audio gets punched out to our own Discord server. And the Discord server, of course, you can, you're not limited by the number of characters, and you can put in links and things like that. So please join our Discord server as well. All right, so this week we're talking about the Undead and Necromancers. And while it's been talked about quite a bit, I think there's some new pathways we can take. And so I thought we would back ourselves into a corner and go, what are we going to talk about? Now, the thumbnail image doesn't exactly describe what recent movie that came out that kind of took a different twist on the whole zombie apocalypse idea. Now, we're definitely not necessarily only talking about zombie apocalypse, but as far as multimedia goes, that's the closest we get to the kind of things that we're talking about when we talk about the Undead and Necromancers. Now, yes, there are vampire shows and even mummy movies and television and things like that, but I thought we'd talk about at least here in the States, a little known movie called Train to Busan. Train to Busan is a Korean movie. It is subtitled here in the States, and it takes a twist on something very highly rated by those who are into the horror genre, because it rejuvenated something that has been very tired and staid and hasn't had too many really good ideas in it, at least as far as a full-length movie goes in terms of the zombie apocalypse. We all know about the dropping viewership of a television show known as The Walking Dead. And I thought we would go over some of the things that happens in multimedia that we can translate over, some of the evidence we can translate over into our games, and some of the elements that are used in them, and use them, in our role-playing games. Not necessarily mechanical, but we can go into a lot of that, because this is Tuesday, so it does have a lot to do with Crunch Time Tuesday as well. So we'll go to all that. All right, so the very first thing that I want to bring up is survival. Okay, and in a zombie apocalypse, and you can extrapolate this out any way you want to in your role-playing games, is this idea of accelerating or escalating survival. And the reason why I bring that up is because I'm going to say that a lot of role-playing games are based on this idea that the conflict you're going against somehow is matched against the player character's capabilities. Now, that's not to say that players should always fail from the get-go, but there is this idea that if I'm a level 6 or tier 2 character in Dungeons and Dragons, that the majority of my interactions with the world are going to be tier 2, level 6 challenges. Now, they may vary within, because of the math involved in 5th edition, there is some kind of bounded accuracy. Bounded accuracy meaning that the ratio of success and failure does not vary very much once you add in all of the modifiers and things of that nature. And the same goes for that. But in a zombie apocalypse style setting, in a lot of movies, you have these peaks and flows, ebbs and flows. And the reason for that is because, much like any horror genre, the players, well, I guess they are players, the actors, the protagonists are usually placed in situations where they need to make quick decisions, and there's a foreshadow of more and more things to come. And oftentimes, either we as the viewers show that the protagonists have no idea what it is, or they do show the protagonist, and we as the viewer may not even understand just how deadly that escalation might even become. So, a couple examples that we could take, for example, such as a Train to Busan, is this idea like, having it's the typical like locked door, but you can see all of the ravaging undead behind it, right? And we all know if you have any locked door, cage, barrier between the undead and the heroes, the protagonists, that there's going to be some reason why that barrier is going to fall. It's just a given, right? Whether it's an abandoned store, or say in Dungeons and Dragons, whether they're locked down in a pit, or there's they are in a moat, or they are behind rusty bars in a cage or something. It's foreshadowing to the players like, hey, listen, it might be pretty easy for you to navigate here, but at some point they're going to get out. There's just no doubt they're going to get out. And sure, is a little bit of a little bit ridiculous that the main characters literally see the doors about to break on their hinges, and they're like, I'm not going to do anything about it. Like, yeah, a little bit ridiculous sometimes, but such as in the movie The Train to Busan, they're in a bounded location. They're on the train, and of course you have the train doors that are closed, and there's like the doubles. It's basically a locked door. There's a gap between a train car, and there's another locked door, and of course you can see them, scraping and trying to bite at the glass, and their fingers are bleeding because they're trying to scrape so hard against the metal and the glass and stuff to get at the main characters, who effectively really don't have very much ability to fight off this apocalypse, this zombie horde or something like that. Which brings me to another thing, and that is, even mindless creatures have a mission. They have a purpose. And that's to say that the prototypical Dungeons and Dragons, like skeleton, zombie, maybe even sometimes ghosts or banshees and things like that, maybe a wight or a wraith, is, to kill the player characters. And while that default isn't bad, give them a purpose. Give them a motivation. Are they trying to rend flesh from the player characters? That's fine. Okay. Are they trying to kidnap the player characters? Are they trying to steal something from them? We know in classic movies, there's like brains. It's always been like brains. And it's like, well, are they trying to eat their brains? Are they literally trying to eat the player characters, or are they trying to rend their flesh, which is something different? Okay, are they trying to corral them? And then the opposite of that is thinking about what are they doing when the player characters aren't there. We've seen in a lot of zombie movies that the zombies will either they'll kind of zone out because they don't have any stimuli, or sometimes they, like in The Walking Dead, they'll wander around aimlessly. There are times where we've seen the undead try to vaguely go back to their old stomping grounds for some reason, having a fragment or a shadow of their past life. So give your mindless undead like a purpose, even if that purpose is minor. it gives them a little bit of a motivation and immerses the player characters, right? Little bit of a verisimilitude. And maybe, just maybe, the player characters might even be able to call upon that. Like, for example, I played in a game where we were walking through this accursed desert, and anything that died that we knew of, at least sentient, would rise again as the undead. But because there was sandstorms and things like that, like the undead creatures would like fall down um, dunes and get covered in sand, and then they would rise again as like zombies or skeletons. And most of them were trying to reenact in small ways what they did before they died. So a lot of people were like digging in the, undead were digging in the dirt looking for water, or you'd see like a zombie family like struggling along in the sands, and one of the zombies would reach back because one of the other family members would fall down and try to help them back up to start walking across the sands again. And so they were reenacting their past life or unfinished lives, and that might be a possibility also. And this is in a way just as important as what kinds of undead you use or what capabilities you give them is a part of their limitations, right? So you could make, both scientifically and using magic, a reason why the undead can still see or hear or smell or whatever the case may be, right? And so are they motivated by like heat signatures? Is it light and dark? Is it sound? Walking Dead used sound. The louder the sound, the greater chance they had of walking towards that sound, right? In Train of Busan, they're on a train, and when a train would go through tunnels, maybe it had something to do with the light or the sound or something. But when they were in darkness, the undead would just immediately stop, and they would just start to sway back and forth a little bit unperturbed, right? In 28 days later, those were rage zombies, fast running rage zombies. I don't know if some people would argue that they weren't really zombies at all, but whatever the case may be, they were, again, they would wander aimlessly until they saw a subject, and then they would just be enraged and want to, rend that person limb from limb to destroy that person out of rage. So maybe your undead are more rage zombies and such, and so they pick up, large stone and or metal and or wooden items to smash people in the head with or something. They could be armed because they are just enraged. So give them a little motivation, give them a little character, and give them some, I guess, weaknesses to exploit. Because if you're going to add in an escalation factor, such as in A Train to Busan, the movie. Sorry, spoiler alerts, but in the movie, it starts out where you see just one individual scramble their way onto a train, and a train leaves the station, and then of course we get to see the transformation as the person who is bitten or infected begins to change and shift and whatnot, and of course it spreads that to other people on the train. The same thing here is, you know, how are you going to describe some of their capabilities, their mindlessness, their vast strength and numbers that give them such greater capabilities, and then maybe there's some exploits that the player characters can use. For example, if there is a 10-foot pit between the undead and the protagonist in your game, will the undead fall into the pit mindlessly, right? If there's a wall of fire or a blade barrier or something, will they walk into it aimlessly, going after the player characters in a straight line? Same thing would be if they're, trudging through a swamp, and there's some like, you know, Komodo dragons or like a swarm of carrion eating vultures or something. Will they just ignore them and then go into it? Or are they a little more savvy, or are they being controlled by something that's more savvy? The same would go with lighting them on fire. Do they keep on fighting, and are they just burning and and attacking the PCs anyway, or do they run from fire? So the same goes for like faith, the power of faith, and the the symbology that it represents? Are they rejected and pushed away by faith in any way, or do they have a different origin? Which is another thing. Bringing up again, like I told you, we would talk about something. Train to Busan. You do get the idea that their origin is chemical in nature, and we've seen in modern day, zombie apocalypses. We've moved well away from magic being the origin, and we've moved farther into science being the origin. So what are some of the origins for your undead, right? Is it an alchemical concoction? Is a scientific necromancer, and this is a side effect of something, like, I don't know, trying to find an elixir for immortality or whatever? Is this a curse on a family line and or population? Is this a twisted blessing? Someone demanded to have a long life, and some godling or something was like, yeah, I'll give you a long life. Here you go, you mofo, right? Like, is there something like that? So getting a little bit of that origin in there might be a possible way for the player characters to fight the escalation. Now, let's go into the escalation factor. All right. So again, a don't, and I normally don't give out don'ts, but don't roll for hundreds of zombies and skeletons and ghosts and all that stuff. Don't do that. Better to make them monster chunks, or like, what's another way to put it? Environmental hazard chunks all over your battlefield, and then just have them break off into bits and pieces, right? So you could have, I don't know, a swarm of like 1,500 hit point zombies, and just make them a big giant ass creature, and then just break off chunks from that, so that you're not constantly rolling for each one, keeping track of all the hit points and all the armor class. I wouldn't do that at all. Now, if you're going to make them a big swarm monster, of course you're going to have you're going to have to increase their strength, or just give them advantage if you're talking about 5th edition. Give them multiple attacks because they can fill up a big space. And of course, being a swarm monster, or being multiple swarm monsters, the limitations on being able to move through the space of those creatures, and using other techniques like knocking them down, or pushing the PCs, or blocking off escape routes and things like that, can really ramp up the tension, especially since, by using the rules you already have, you then can say, oh, there's an open field. And then, as the game master, you're like, or dungeon master, you're like, nah, it's not really an open field, because there's these 3 swarm chunks that are floating around, and they're taking up so many squares or square feet of space that you can't move through unless you have the ability to move through, large groups of medium-sized creatures, right? Your halflings and some other capabilities. I think rogues have the ability to do that, et cetera, right? So, why isn't my... There we go. Sorry, lost the chat. Sorry. I have to keep my cursor moving or something. It's kind of weird. Anyway, the another thing that Train to Busan has done to really engage the senses when it comes to trying to reinvigorate or take a look at something new in a genre that has like kind of died off a little bit. T. Cameron was about to bring up. Oh man, you guys. So Cameron says severed arms can become crawling hands, and severed heads can become beheaded, both adding to your hordes of undead. Something that Train to Busan does really well, and Cameron brings up this fact, is that change up the difficulties, both in the location that they're at and what the enemies are doing. Okay, so an example would be, right, like, when the player characters, and mind you, they don't have to do this themselves, but you can set up circumstances where it does happen. Player characters rush past a portcullis that has dropped down on the undead, and the undead are still alive, right? So have the undead reaching through the portcullis. Have them crushed underneath a wagon and they're reaching for the player characters' thighs and legs and calves and stuff to hold their ankles or whatnot. You know, when the players hack away at some zombies and skeletons, have the arms crawling towards them. And sure, in the bigger scope, it might not be much of a threat, but having a still biting head, biting at the player characters that might infect them if you're going to go with the plague zombie, or hands reaching out of the dirt, or through caged through those that are encaged or trapped underneath something, or still struggling even after the player characters have down them, or like I said before, they light them on fire, and you're like, great, okay, they're on fire, but they don't feel the heat, feel the pain. They're still going to try to tackle you. You're like, what the? Oh man, we made our own barrier. This is getting worse than I thought. So hell, even slaughtering so many of them that they become both cover and a hazard to climb over because they've killed so many. How many times have we seen in fiction where the undead are killed? There's so many of them that they start piling up against something and they start to climb over each other to get to something else. Spoiler alert: if you haven't seen World War Z, they do a physical manifestation of something that happened in the book World War Z, where I believe it was in Israel. The undead, and these are rage zombies. Well, fast zombies. I'm calling them rage zombies just because I like the idea of them being like running at full speed. Okay, and they're so intent on getting to where they need to go that they start climbing up each other to get over a giant wall. This is how you do some escalation, right? Like Karen was like, laugh out loud. Now they're zombies with fire auras. Good job, players. Good job, right? But why not? Why not have that? If a player character puts down a grease spell and the zombie starts slipping and sliding on the grease spell, great, it works. But now maybe there's, instead of 5 of them, now there's like 25 and 30 and 50 piling up behind this grease spell they can't get past until, guess what? They all start falling across the grease, and then the undead start walking over the bodies of each other. Spoiler alert, I know I'm giving spoiler alerts this whole thing. In the Train to Busan, they used, and I don't know the legalities of this and how it happened, but in that movie, they had real actors portraying rage zombies, and they had them running at such full speed that they would fall face first into the ground. And as some of them were trying to get up, other stunt people in the movie were literally stepping over the backs and on the arms and hands and faces of the other actors running. And now, mind you, was some of it CGI? Sure it was, but it was basically like every man for himself. And I swear they had real actors pushing and shoving and walking over and climbing over each other person. They had contortionists being used when they were going through the infection transformation, contorting their bodies in these painful ways, or at least visually it looked very painful. Of course, they're contortionists. They've trained themselves, but you get my point, right? Yeah, I don't know if they would allow stunt people to do what they did in that movie, but there's some scenes in there where you're like, they clearly stepped on another actor to try to get over them, and I don't think that felt too good. They went for it. These people, kudos to them if you haven't seen Train to Busan, which is available on Netflix here in the States. Anyway, uh, going on past that is, while the zombie hordes or whatever aren't intelligent, they can get past certain obstacles, right? Going back to a PC standing in front of a 10-foot pit, when they fall into that 10-foot pit, how many need to fall in before others start just stepping on top of the heads and bodies of those before them to get across to the PCs, thereby increasing the escalation of it. Escalation can not only just cut off places of safety, but increase the dangers as player characters realize that if they get grappled or pinned down or knocked down or suffer exhaustion or even mental stress and madness, that they can become overcome. For example, taking those long and short rests might not be possible because the undead don't rest. Cameron says, heck, a necromancer could do it on purpose. Cover them with oil, then when the players least expect it, light it off. There might even be enough smoke to obscure, and the smells would be nauseating. Hell's yes. Hell yeah. Yeah, why wouldn't a necromancer, or heck, a necromancer's lieutenants out there in the battlefield, like some kind of like skeletal warrior or mummy and mummy lord or something, or reskin or whatever, wraiths and wights or something in command of them, lighting them on fire? Heck yeah. And especially if you want to really ramp up the tier levels. Now, of course, there are like zombie minotaurs, and there's of course there's zombie dragons, but there's things in between that we can use as well. And we already have an example of necrotic zombies, which is the yellow musk zombie, which is plant-based. Why can't we have the same thing from other origins, like elemental origins, or what are some other origins from oozes, or now my brain just got stuck. Maybe there's something strangely natural about it. Meaning like maybe people in this setting just simply rise from the dead unless they're given death rites over top of their body. And if there's nothing necrotic about it, it's just a normal thing in the setting, right? It just, like in The Walking Dead, you eventually find out that everybody is infected with this thing. So if you just die from natural causes, boom, just rise up again. And so that's why when people are near death, they have to get the whole like stab to the brain or bullet to the brain or severed head in order to not rise again. So maybe there's something like that in this world. Heck, you could even make the case that radiant energy brings people back from death, even if it's a somewhat parody of life. Maybe there is something radiant in the radiant energy, because radiant energy might be indiscriminate. Like it doesn't care that your personality isn't back, just as long as your body keeps on moving. Or Cameron says parasites that take over the brains of corpses and use them to their own ends. Ooh, me likes that. Me likes that a lot. Yeah, yeah. Hell, the undead could even be agents of a rogue god or something like that being used, or a patron of warlocks that are like coaxing back fragments of the dead. Now, here's another thing that happens in movies, and you're going to have to make this decision for yourselves. And well, we're talk more about the necromancers themselves rather than the undead, because we talked about that part, and we'll get back to the undead hordes in a minute, and things that have happened in the Train to Busan that are pretty important. But for necromancers, I get that players want to, raising the dead and having an army of something sounds like a cool thing. And much like was placed in the Discord, everybody wants to be metal, right? Wearing black, mixed in with a little bit of pale white, and high collars, leather. I'm evil, I'm gothic. Sure, we like that. We're into that kind of thing. But like yesterday, we talked about the social implications. Okay, sure, you may think you're good and you feel like you have every good intention, but most, if not all, cultures around the world have pretty specific beliefs and cultural identity when it comes to dealing with the dead. Some people are known as untouchable if they touch the dead. Yeah, everybody wants to be an edgelord, like, yeah, death metal and stuff. Zombie ant. Oh yeah. Head splitting fungus. Yep, love it. There is a. By the way, I added it in. If you look beside me, I added it into head splitting fungus that affects more than just ants. It affects people, and it's pretty nasty too. Yeah, it's a fungus that literally infects ants. It's a real world thing that infects ants to cause them to go to particular regions, especially like tall areas or something, to have their brains explode to spread the pollen or the spores so that the head splitting fungus can keep on growing. It's pretty nasty, and so I gamified it. It's inside of wetlands if you want. It's pretty nasty. Anyway, so there's nothing wrong with somebody wanting to be that way, but you have to understand that on paper, sure, I'm a good necromancer. Setting wise, people are going to have problems with that when you're walking around with their grandparents and their kids as your cannon fodder. Now, the other part of it is making the distinction between, and this was brought up by Caius in a comment, is that is calling upon necrotic energy itself an evil act, or much like calling upon the power of a fiend to heal your fellow allies, right? If you're a warlock that has a fiendish pack, is it just evil, just enacting their powers despite you doing it for a good reason, or and if so, are you drawing the spirits of the dead back from their place of rest into their bodies, or are you just activating them like a construct? Right, you're just a puppeteer. The spirit is gone, but you're just reactivating their body and using them as equipment. Now, no matter what the answer to that is, that has nothing to do with the social implications of a person walking around with the dead, right? An army of the dead, you know. Mike Gould says there's a fungus similar that infects cicadas. They are compelled to spread the fungus to other insects. And it says, to be honest, the fungus sounds similar to the myconid servant, a plant-based pseudo-undead. Yeah. Mike Gould says skeletons and zombies are soulless. They're constructs. In your setting, yes. Some might feel that the way they describe their setting, that they aren't necessarily soulless. If they for example, some may say that they are still trying to reenact a little bit of their past lives. Now, sure, in general, we consider them to be mindless, under the passive control of whoever created them. But even so, that doesn't that doesn't negate the. That's like a dragonborn trying to explain to people that don't like lizard people that they're a dragonborn, right? It's like there isn't much of a distinction, despite the fact that you yourself are like, no, I'm a paladin, and they're just like, I don't hear you. You've got scales. You're dead now, right? So there is that fact, and again, in any real life, not real life, any setting worth its salt is going to have the people there, the authorities, the religions, the governments, the people who are and are not responsible for death rights in your world are going to have a problem with a necromancer walking around, right? Michael says, "Is animate dead then a lesser raised dead? Seems overly powerful to both create a minion and draw a soul back from the beyond." Well, true. I'm not. I'm not arguing the game effects. I'm just saying that some people in their setting might be like, well, even on a minor sense, the fact that you are not literally controlling their movements, that you're giving them some kind of animation itself, either is it their soul or is it your necrotic power that's doing it? And if it's their soul, then you got a real problem. If it's necrotic power, then is drawing upon necrotic power itself evil, or is it just another energy source? And so there some would consider the act of doing a thing like that to always put you down the path of, it's like the path of temptation, right? It's like it's like the Jedi, hey, the path to the dark side is pretty simple, and someone could make the claim, well, I just want to learn the dark side powers, I'm not going to turn evil, and they will argue back at you, sure, you say that now, but using that power itself is the temptation, which means that you are tempted, which means that at some point you're going to be evil. So some could make that claim. Now, I'm not saying that it should or shouldn't be a certain way. I'm saying like different people look at it in different ways. So, people who parlay with a necromancer in the world might have a problem with it. And so therefore, for example, not in a lot of the zombie apocalypse movies, they always come across the one or more individuals that might have had something to do with the zombie apocalypse in the first place. And usually when that happens, there isn't too many good feelings when someone's like, it was a mistake, I didn't mean to do it, and they're like, yeah, but whatever. Mike Gould says, if a dead person has a restless soul, say a ghost, and you animate the corpse of that soul, does the ghost disappear when you animate the skeleton? That's my point. Like I said, I think you're arguing something that I'm not arguing about, right? Like maybe in that world, that's exactly what happens. I would allow that to happen, take out the zombie and the ghost gets released from the corpse or something. Why not? Or the ghost could be a fragment, like maybe the ghost is 80% of the personality and the zombie's the other 20%. Who knows? We don't know. The point is, it doesn't exist. You can't argue something that doesn't exist. So sure, we there's game stats and then there's the way you implement them. So I would be down for either one of those. If somebody said, hey, in my world, every necromantic power does draw that spirit back in one way or another, or mutates it or twists it, or takes, I don't know what, takes the pain of their last last breath and brings it back into the life of the undead, and that's why they are still, the warrior zombie is still carrying the sword, or the dead mom is still like trying to, she's scratching at the door of her old house or something like that. Like there could be like an echo, I guess would be a difference than a soul, but then you'd have to, then you go through the process of like splitting hairs, both if for the people who are necromancers and the people who look at them. I can pretty much guarantee you that in a public sense, most people are not going to care about that. They're going to go like, it's the, what are the untouchables? It's the executioners, the people who handle the dead, the people who give death rites, the places where the dead are laid, if they are laid to rest, or burning ships, or placed in a pit and acid poured over them, or whatever the case might be, mummification or something like that. Like if there's a process that they go through and they don't go through that process, or maybe come back through that process, like for example, something that throws a monkey wrench into it, or like mummification is a thing, right? So is, if somebody becomes a mummy, is it, they believe in Egyptologically, they believe that the spirit splits. So that could be a good reason as well, where a portion of the spirit splits out of the physical body. So that could be a good reason why there's a separate ghost and or undead walking around. And then there's tiers of undead. So like scombies and scombies, zombies and skeletons are like the mindless versions. But then you start going up the tier, like where do vargoyles fit into that part, or like what are some other things, like vargoyles, skeletal warriors, wraiths and wights, what else, specters. Man, my brain's not, I'm thinking of a lot of them, but I can't think of all the names. They're like mixing up, but you know what I mean. You start going higher and higher in the tier levels, and then you kind of like you start rubbing up against that fine line. Whereas like zombies and skeletons are pretty easy to get away from that line where you go, nah, they don't really have their souls in them. But yeah, Michael says create undead can allow one to raise a white. That would very much create a zombie plague, as discussed yesterday. Mummies could be created as well, which would spread mummy rot. I believe um, mummy rot is it a mummy lord that can create more mummies, or do they just rot people faster? And it's the wraiths or the whites that create wraiths or something. I can't remember, but there's a lot of them that like with if they fall, if you're killed by the thing, you then rise again, which just basically means that like like you said, it will spread because not only are you taking away an ally, you're building your army bigger, better, faster, stronger. So yeah, it could spread pretty good. And then who are these people creating mummies out there, right? Like what kind of ritual is that? And can they be paid to do that? Are they constantly doing it? Are they doing it only for nobles? So you can start to spread something that way as well. Like a cult that is doing a thing and they're like, I don't care if they come back alive or not. My purpose is to mummify the nobles. That's it. When they die, you know. Cameron's like Scombi. Now I know what to call a mostly eaten zombie. Yeah, and like your Mike Gould, to get to your point, it like is a zombie that has no flesh now a skeleton? They kind of don't go into that just because of gamifying it, right? But that kind of makes sense. If you light a zombie on fire and fire goes out and the flesh is burned off, does it get to graduate to a skeleton? And they're like, yes, now I've got resistance to a piercing weapon. Sweet. I don't know. That's stupid, but you know what I mean. Mike says a touch of zombie has a chance to catch mummy rot. Wraiths create specters, and whites create zombies. Wraiths create specters, and mummy rot kills you because you can't. It lowers your maximum hit points, I believe, is how it works. So it's not the mummies that spread each other, although a cult could make more mummies. But it's the wraiths and whites that create more and more in their plague, which, we talked about that as like a pirate pirate creating their own creating turning them into specters and zombies as pirates floating on a ship somewhere. But you know what? Doesn't mean they got to be on a pirate ship or something like that, like a ghost ship. They could very well be like a noble family or a council of magi or a druidic cult that's been out in the wild after a plague swept through a druidic cult and now they've been twisted. It could be an ancient curse or in a bloodline or something like that. Tesla says in order from weakest to strongest, according to the D&D turn undead table, it is skeleton then zombie. Ooh, I didn't realize it. Skeleton zombie, ghoul, which I think ghoul, for me, I always feel like ghouls are a bit of an aside. But anyway, but yeah, skeleton zombie, ghoul, shadow, white, ghast, wraith, mummy, specter, vampire, ghost, lich, and then specials. And specials are probably all of like the one-offs, the unique monsters, the ones who are like lich level and beyond, like the Draco lich, and the ones that are above that. Yeah, I could see that. And also, in between there, you could probably put in like, if you wanted to, you could add on. If you gave any of these from skeleton, zombie, ghoul, shadow, ghast, etc., if you gave them a little portion of their old life, so if they used to be a mage or some kind of warrior or something like that, maybe they have some skills and or arcane ability. So I think you could like do one-offs from them. So yeah, I always thought skeletons were above zombies, but for some reason, maybe it's just because zombies are normally like they give them weapons that they can hold and zombies don't. But whatever, that's just in my own mind. Anyway, Andres Martin says, I've always thought that ghouls are the most terrifying of the undead. Between paralysis and the ability to infect others, a plague of these would be horrible. And then Mike says specters in 5e are a very low CR in 5e. Yeah, and CR is kind of like is kind of has a weird finagle to it. Based, I'm sure a lot of it has to be based on numbers and player character capabilities. Like Andres, making up bring up the fact that ghouls are terrible because they can paralyze you and infect others, and so therefore, like, if they get off one or more of their paralysis on a player character group, and you've only got like 4 to 6 allies, and 2 of them are paralyzed, yeah, they can kind of pile on the rabbit. I like that fact because something that let's go back to, since today is TV and movie, to RPG, tabletop RPG. Um, the fact that, and we brought this up earlier, like lighting them on fire. They have a plague that they can spread, like a ghoul, or they have paralysis, or like yesterday we mentioned, you cut them open and there's something nasty and evil on the inside of them. Insect swarms, or oozes, or spraying a disease or poison or acid on the things that kill them. The great thing about that is you can change the dynamic of the encounter. Change the parameters. If the undead are reaching down from the PCs are in an abandoned house or something, or warehouse or whatever, and there's a rotted ceiling above them, and the undead are reaching down on top of the player characters, maybe piercing them with spears isn't the smart thing because they'll spill down their stomach acid or whatnot. And maybe the more undead that step on top of the rickety old rooftop ceiling above them, it might crash down on top of the player characters, right? So you have this ability to not just create a larger horde, but to make the danger even worse by, forcing them to stay at range, or forcing the player characters to go to higher levels, getting up on a catwalk or a bridge or a balcony or something. The barbarian that can very easily cut the heads off, one shot a troll per hit, it might not want to do that when they start one-shotting zombies and they're starting to dump gray oozes and black puddings and ochre jellies all over the place when they start slicing them wide open, right? Michael says, ghouls are terrifying. They attack multiple times with a chance to paralyze every time. I rarely use ghouls on my players because it seems unfair for the CR. And paralyze them each hit to be a crit. That's just a player character ender. Yeah. Now here's the thing, though. There are role playing ways to get around that, right? Like, are the ghouls? Is there a ghast that takes the first kill from the ghouls? Like, so they paralyze all the PCs and then capture them with their top hats and Victorian dress. Not that they have to be like that, but you get my point, right? Are they holding them for later because they love themselves some dead flesh, so maybe they hold them later so that they can freshly kill the PCs or something. Like they could be under the control of a master necromancer who has gassed lieutenants who have what's another one of these things? Who has vampire lords as commanders or something. Like you could get around that a couple of different ways. Ultimately, yeah, it is a PC ender, and that could bring up that if the PCs aren't used to being attacked by a bunch of ghouls, or hell, they're in a battle and the ghouls turn the corner and the PCs know what the hell's going on. That might be a good chance for the PCs to go like, let's run, but we're killing the zombies. Like, mofo, let's get the hell out of here. So yeah, I don't have a problem with them, and like I agree with you, Mike. Like, yeah, it is a player ender, but why not? That's actually kind of a cool thing. Yep, yep. They save them from marinating. Pour some maggots on some open wounds just to get the flavor started. Nasty. So, all right. So, going back to Train to Busan, something else that we oftentimes isn't really incorporated, especially in Dungeons and Dragons, but is a huge part of the apocalypse, and that is the moral quandaries. Um, Tons, one moral quandary stacked on another. It's usually, if you want to go even deeper into it, it is zombie apocalypses are less about the zombies for storytelling and more about the people involved, right? When society breaks down, what do people do when yeah, Michael says, "Eat Bobby Flay now on Undead TV." Next up, did you just mess up with some punctuation there? Uh, let's eat, Grandma. Let's eat, comma, Grandma. Yeah, yeah. You got Undead TV. We're gonna make a little fricassee with some of our adventurers here hanging there. Yeah, they've been able to marinate a little bit. Poke, poke, poke. Oh, they're still alive. Great. No, so one great thing to do with it is to add in a whole bunch of crunchy little red shirted NPCs, right? Um, yeah, Tesla's like, don't ask what the mystery ingredient is. Yeah, Undead got talent. This is great. This is some great stuff. They start stacking on top of each other like a pyramid to get to some hanging victim. They're like, no. They're like, this is great. This is awesome. Uh, but seriously, they not seriously. The putting PCs in a position where they might have to save innocent people or make the decision between saving innocent people or running for their lives, or do we is 10 people the maximum we can protect, or is it 30? Maybe somebody in the group does something very selfish, and the PCs are now put in a position where they might have to put somebody down, and if they put somebody down, it might affect the morale of the rest of the group, right? So throwing in, it's usually humanity that becomes the greater monster in the zombie apocalypse, and that's the thing. Undead got talent. Bardic Undead. Anyway, Cameron says, I think an intelligent ghoul might get into get into OSHA and lower their requirements to create more accidental deaths. Ghouls hanging around the corner like, take the safety glasses off. Those are the rules. You're like, what? Ghouls, a ghoulish union hanging around like those gnomish and dwarven factories and forges and stuff, just waiting for something to happen. Like, nah, boss, we'll clean this up. Ghouls are like, yeah, we got this. I got 6 of my guys on it right now. Yeah. And the world eventually becomes Star Wars. Yep. Not a single railing to be had. And everyone's like, I don't understand why people are falling off of bridges. Not a single railing anywhere. Like, yay. Mm-mm-mm. Chow down on some all those Jedi and Sith that fall off of those cliffs and stuff like that. People chowing down on ghouls, chowing down on their internal organs. Like, dude, I didn't know you were going to become a half man, half spider. You should have told me. Anyway, the something else that the other things that happen in Train to Busan, which I'm pushing the movie. Yes, I am. Blatantly, I don't have any stock in it, but I'm just a fan of really good zombie flicks because I'm still a fan, even though they're kind of played out. The In the movie, because we're going to talk about this in Third Pillar Thursday, talk about exploration, is that because they're on the train, they're constantly moving to another location, which basically changes how the actors in the movie, and something you can steal from this is just changing the dynamic, right? So always changing the landscape, always changing, like, are they above the PCs? Are they below them? Are they closing them into a tight space? Are they chasing them on open ground? Are the undead again trapped somewhere? Are the PCs trapped inside of a place where there's other people transforming? Um, would Sahogan be sushi to a ghoul? Wow. Wow. That's pretty nasty. You know what? You bring up a really good point. A really good point. So we open up our monster manual, right? And follow me on this. We open up the monster manual. We've got like minotaurs, we've got ghouls, we've got our undead, we've got our dragons, we've got all these things in there. Why isn't one, or maybe we should do this, why aren't some monsters victims of other monsters? Whether they are now, yes, we've seen goblinoid hordes being bullied around by the big bad, right? Like, wizard slash lich slash dragon slash fiend or something, having some kind of goblinoid hordes and beating them about the head and shoulders to get them to do what they want. But um right, see, but that's my point. Like Mike says, undead are created from humanoids, all humanoids. Why? Like, okay, an example would be like necromancers tend to be humanoid, okay, and then they create undead that is humanoid. But why? Why? Like, are there undead naga or undead, you know, gargoyles, or like what about all of the other undead monsters? Now, mind you, there are what's the Pathfinder, and I believe third edition had templates where you could probably put over an undead template on another creature, which this changes the dynamic, right? Undead harpies, could you just put an undead feature on them and you're done, right? Yeah, Pet Cemetery, undead cat. Mike Gould says Out of the Box has alternate undead and a halfling werewolf. Why are all stock undead and lycanthropes always human? My that's my point exactly. Like, why? If you want to talk about diversity, although the people we're talking about, the halflings are like, leave me out of it. Like, I don't even want parts of that. But yes, I'm making fun of the diversity issue, but sue me, whatever. But you're right. 99% of undead are portrayed as human. Not even okay. Side note: some are elves. I think ghouls come from elven stock. Somewhat canonical, whatever. But yeah, yeah. But like Tesla says, humans are the lowest common denominator. Maybe that says something about us. I don't know. But yeah, other monsters are. Why aren't other monsters becoming undead for whatever reason? Right? Plague, yellow musks, necromancers turning them. Flying undead. While yes, sure, maybe you could do the whole tattered wing thing, but ghosts as well. Why not a ghostly? What's a really cool ghostly undead creature, like a ghostly centaur, right? Or a ghostly manticore or something. Um, a wraith, or a wight that is both a wraith or a wight and a troll or whatever. Trolls might, maybe they're more radiant. Mike Gould says, I've had hags pretend to be non-humans. Again, Out of the Box has a gnome night hag. See, yep. Promoting that. By the way, the out of the box encounters created by Nerdarchy, guys. Check that out. As a matter of fact, can't wait for my physical copy. I know there's definitely ghost lions. Yep. God's help you if there's an Aarakocra ghoul, death from above. Yep, ghost lions. Andrea says, I finally remember a hill giant were tyrannosaur in an adventure. I don't remember that, but damn. Yeah, giants. Giants are close to humanity. Why aren't there giant kind wizards, undead, necromancers? The frost giant using necromantic power to raise, I don't know, dead hill giants or something to use in their war or whatnot. Like we don't really see that too often. Or like you said, like a were tyrannosaur. Why don't they suffer from that? So yeah, that's pretty. But I'm not advocating always doing that, but it is something to think about. I was just like, wait a minute, all the undead are human. Like, why is that? Now, you could make canonically that when certain things die and are become undead, and I'm using this very generally, they become something else. Like um, undead stone giants might become earth elementals, or maybe gnomes become something like illusory. So you could classify different races or humanoids or even other monsters in your world to become something other, to become some other thing in your world, right? Like humans become zombies and skeletons, but maybe halflings become something else. I don't know. Um, Mike Gould says ogres are classified as giants in 5e. There's an ogre zombie right in the monster manual. I'd like to see how that was made. You you make a point, right? What, did another undead fossils? That's true. Um, do undead creatures age? Hmm. Do they have a shelf life? That's a thing too. Like does a zombie's flesh deteriorate over time, or is it kept in a stasis like state until it is killed? That might be a reason why there's more undead and they're like, there's a reason why there isn't a zombie apocalypse already in Dungeons and Dragons, that they have a limited shelf life, either extremely short shelf life, meaning that they very easily decompose or something. Michael says undead age like SpaghettiOs, a shelf life of 10,000 years. Undead, like how did you survive? I was eating Twinkies and SpaghettiOs. Tesla says in the Dresden Files, Harry reanimated Sue, Chicago's T-Rex skeleton. Yeah, so why not? I mean, and then maybe it's all culturally based. So the human lands are all human, but let's say there is the PCs go out to the deep jungle where there's like, T Rexes and like, you know, jungle creatures or something like that. Maybe there's undead crocodiles, giant crocs, or undead Sahogan because they're tired of being eaten like sushi, by the ghouls or something. Michael says it's not magic; it's the damn preservatives. I don't know. I'm thinking those preservatives, man, those spaghettios are pretty damn close to magic, right? Uh, and like I said before, some of the origins of our monsters might, they could come from something else, a curse, alchemical. Taking that weird alchemical bath might just bring you back. And of course, listen, they're undead. We don't mind killing them. So yeah, imagine how much mold is on the average zombie. Hitting that with a sword should probably cause some poison effect. Oh, so here's some examples. Hitting a zombie causes an acid spray or a poison spray, or creates a cloud of dust, even enough for you to choke on. So maybe it becomes like a 5-foot area effect. Maybe that mold or dust is something like from like what a troglodyte releases from them, or maybe it becomes an irritant and causes like a stunning effect or a blindness effect, or it become you could go down a long pathway of that. I've used yellow mold on zombies. Yeah, that's pretty nasty, and I like it though. I like it a lot. What's to stop a necromancer from assembling a skeleton from multiple sources? Now it has 4 arms, 2 heads. I don't think there's any. I, I think that's a logical conclusion, right? Multiple bones in the legs, so it has a greater height slash mass to it. More arms, more weapons to use. Assembled from like Maybe that's where that ogre zombie came from, mixing like ogre bones and minotaur bones and hill giant bones. Um, Tesla Ranger puts in a sliding scale of undead regeneration. So, type 1, no healing, no progressive rotting. All right. Oh, no, no healing and progressive rotting. All right. Type 2, no healing, but no rotting. So they last longer. Okay. Type 3 is healing, but progressive rotting. And type 4 would be healing and no rotting. So that they kind of reconstitute, I guess would be the thing. Would be like a type 4. I'm feeling you on that. I like that. Well, anyway, guys, we are a bit ridiculous here on this channel, but I want to thank you guys very much for being part of the show. Thank you very much for bringing your A game. You guys always bring your A game. You guys are always here. For those who don't know, I am a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing. We have a new release, 2 new releases really from Critical Hit Publishing. Our new release for Cinematic Environments, Wetlands, and a new release from the available on DriveThruRPG in the Miskatonic repository for Call of Cthulhu. But all of that can be found there. Information down in the doobly-doo. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for following me. Thank you very much for checking out Critical Hit Publishing and myself, DJ. Everybody, have a great one. Thank you very much for watching. I'm out. I'm a little bit awkward there. All right. I finally got my asset there. There we go. You guys have a good one. See you. Bye.